Ollie, I think we can't have you on the show this week and not talk about the news at Sheffield United. Chris Wilder's back for a third stint. It's becoming a bit like a Darren Ferguson at Peterborough, isn't it, or a Martin Allen at Barnet? The club going back to one manager and again and again. Are you pleased that the club have made these decisions?
I think we had to do something. We had to change something because obviously it had been bad enough as it was, but Friday night, I mean, that was just an embarrassment. And you could see it not just in the manager, but in the players. They gave up. They just did not want to represent the club. They didn't want to be there for the last half an hour of the game. I'm not sure Ben Godfrey wanted to be there for the entire 90 minutes up against Philogene. But yeah, and so something had to change after what happened on Friday. And, I was, over the summer, I was on board with the idea that we might move away from Chris Wilder. I thought it made sense. He'd been our manager for the majority of the last 10 years now, in 2 stints. And if we wanted to modernise the club and we wanted to go down a different route in terms of the new ownership, the new strategy, the new transfer plans, it made a lot of sense for us to be trying something different. It didn't work. And we cannot emphasize how much it didn't work in terms of just being a disaster start to finish. Obviously, everyone can see in terms of the points tally, in terms of the fact we've scored 1 goal so far this season, in the terms of the fact that we've conceded, 12 goals, 13 goals in 5 games. Everything's gone wrong. And so, in the current context, I think Wilder's the only man who could really come into Bramall Lane and it not be a toxic atmosphere. I think he will be a unifying force that brings the fans back together. I think there'll still be some doubts about whether he's the right man long term, but right now that doesn't matter. We need somebody who's going to be the right man short term. And with Chris Wilder in charge, this season is not a complete write-off. Where 9 points behind Coventry in 6th, it's been 5 games of the season. There's every chance that Chris Wilder can turn this team into somebody who can compete for 5th, for 6th in the playoffs. There's every chance he can make us competitive again. And that's what we need right now. And so there's very much question marks over the owners about what the long-term vision looks like now, about how this develops. But for the here and now, Chris Wilder's got to be the right man to take United forward.
What I like about this appointment that it does open up the feeling of what's possible for this season, Ollie. Because if you look at it really simplistically, which is, as I've sometimes said in the past, the only way I can look at it, I think if you extrapolate that, if you use the form that Chris accumulated last season, which was basically 2 points a game, there is a good chance that you can get a points tally this season that's somewhere in the 80s, I would think. And if it's a low bar for automatic promotion this season, then it might be that 80 to 85 points still gets you in there. And if Sheffield United can get a run of wins early doors under Chris Wilder, the season sort of opens up for you again. So again, using that simplistic sort of mathematical logic, this can breed a bit of optimism in terms of what's possible this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, I don't think anyone's going to be talking about automatic promotion right now. I don't think that's on people's minds. I just think it seems so far away, not just in terms of the points, but the squad, the way it's looked so far this season is we've not looked anywhere near a team who could be at that level. I think playoffs is still a realistic target. I think if we'd waited too much longer, if we'd let sort of 6, 7, 8 games go by, then all of a sudden it becomes a long shot to even get into the playoffs. I think Wilder gives us a chance at the playoffs. And I think more than anything else, I said there, I don't know what it means long term for the vision of the owners, for the vision of the club. I actually do think that there's another angle to it, though, which is that long term, this is the best possible outcome for Sheffield United, because Chris Wilder has left an unfinished story at Bramall Lane twice. The first time he was our manager, we were incredibly good until lockdown. And then all of a sudden, we were 4th in the Premier League, lockdown. And the next time I was sat at Bramall Lane, Chris Wilder wasn't our manager and we were bottom of the Premier League. And you were sat there saying, there was no natural occurrence for that to change. We didn't get to sit there as fans in the ground and have a collective experience where we said goodbye, where we came to the end of this great journey. And so it felt unfinished. And so throughout Slavisa Jokanović's time, throughout Heckingbottom's time, there was this noise in the background. Chris Wilder, he's got to come back at some point. He needs to finish he could have us better than this. He would be the one who takes us forward. And so Wilder came back, and obviously last season came this close to being the ultimate Sheffield United legend, because he was 20 minutes away from probably being the biggest Sheffield United legend of all time, because he would have delivered us the win at Wembley that we've been waiting for forever, that nobody alive today has ever seen us win at Wembley, and he was that close to delivering it. And then again, it felt unfinished. It felt like it wasn't a natural breakpoint. And whether I would have made the change or not, it's fair to say that it still feels unfinished. And a big part of Ruben Sayers' time at United is that he was handed a hospital pass. You know, he was given a PR disaster from the owners in the sacking Wilder on 90 points to bring in the guy who only just kept Hull up. Well, that was a PR disaster from the start. So Wilder's name was always in the background, was always sitting there waiting. And so this needs to be the natural end. You know, we could break it down into story structure. We had the beginning, we had the middle. This has got to be the end now. The last time that Chris Wilder's Sheffield United manager, because we need as a club to be able to move on, but it needs to come to a proper end. Let it play out. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see Wilder leave next summer and it be, he did all right and he's leaving next summer. This needs to be a proper breakdown of Chris Wilder will be Sheffield United manager until he decides to retire and ride off into the sunset, or until it goes so badly that the fans and everybody agrees it's time to change. It can't be another one of these, maybe he should have stayed. I'm not so sure. It needs a natural end. We don't need another unfinished symphony. We need the full song. And I think this has got to be the time to do that. And I think for the long term of the club, it's what we need. So I'm delighted to have him back. I'm delighted that we can look forwards this season with a lot of positivity. And hopefully this can be a glorious end to a fantastic love affair of Sheffield United and Chris Wilder.
Chris Wilder's Sheffield United tenure started with Sharpie getting the beers in. It probably needs to finish that way, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, I think what I'm really curious about, Ollie, is Chris Wilder's going to have very high standards for some players in terms of they've got to fight for the badge. And it's interesting seeing you make that expression, because I feel like there's going to be some players that are going to be sort of collateral damage because he's not going to accept it. But there's also going to be some players where it's like he's going to have to give them a second chance, an opportunity, because that's the situation. So which are the ones that Chris Wilder's going to look at and think, I'm not having you? And which are the ones he's going to look at and think, you know what, I'm willing to give you a chance?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the answer to that question is, in all honesty. If I was saying today, I think the players who will come out the worst from this agreement will be Ben Godfrey and will be Louis Barry. I think they're the two who will find themselves in a difficult situation. Because if I was guessing, and it is only guessing, you can't guarantee anything. If I was guessing what Wilder's going to do, I would imagine Gustavo Harmer starts on the left wing on Saturday. Goes back to the position he played for the majority of last season.
Oh, yeah, it'll be as close to last season's template as humanly possible, won't it?
And so with that in mind, where does Louis Barry fit in this Sheffield United team? Because he's not better than Gustavo Harmer. He's had a really disappointing start to the season. I think if you looked at his, and I'm not picking him out specifically, it's just because of the question, but if you looked at his work rate and some of the defensive abilities that he brings, shall we say, he's not somebody who massively fits the system and who runs his blood to water to give his most for the club. That's just not what we've seen.
I've never heard that expression, runs his blood to water.
You've never heard run your blood to water? Oh,
never heard it once in my life.
Maybe it's a Sheffield thing. Run your blood to water. My dad says it all the time. Every time I came off a football field, he'd judge me on two things. He wouldn't care if I'd scored, if I'd played rubbish. It didn't matter how I'd performed. His question would always be, have you got blood or water? And if I'd got blood, I'd not played anywhere near good enough. And if I'd got water, I'd done all right.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. So I think Barry will struggle because Harmer will take that position in the squad. And I think Godfrey, after his performance on Friday night, might just be collateral damage that somebody's got to take the fall for it. Yeah. And sadly, he might end up being that man.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think he's obviously can't have a transfer window, which is almost hilarious because it's like, what a waste. But, that's where we are. But I do think in those circumstances, it's going to be, can we rely on the muscle memory of this is what we did last season and we're close to last season template. So I agree with you about Louis Barry. I could see him being an option on the bench possibly to to bring something different. But I don't think he starts.
No, I don't. Do you know what I would like to see though? It's a question, but what I would potentially like to see, Louis Barry play on the right wing. He doesn't do it. He's not done it very often. He's a left winger. He cuts inside, shoots with his right foot, and tries to find the far top corner. But play him on the right wing. Let's see what he can do in terms of beating his man, getting to the byline, getting across into the box. Let's see his delivery rather than focus on trying to get a shot off all the time. Let's see how he can create for the other players. Because I think he could be such a problem if he can get his winger exposed one-on-one down to the byline, dragging it back across goal. That could be really exciting. And the right wing is a position where United are struggling right now. You know, Andre Brooks isn't a natural fit. You know, Chidozie Ogbene might be fantastic there, but he's coming back from a really serious injury. I think there's a really interesting question about what happens down the right wing, because we've got some options, but is Ogbene fit? Is he going to be back to his best? We don't know. Brooks is inconsistent and flatters to deceive. And so maybe Barry's an option on the right wing. And it's an interesting debate that's going to come. But yeah, I think he might be the highest profile calamity of this managerial change.